Okay, we are live.
Hi everyone, my name is Meg Lacy. This is the third part of Happiness for the Holidays. I know that you had Dr. Paquette for the previous two sessions. He actually got called away for something, and because I have some experience with self-compassion, he invited me to come and give this third talk and kind of put my spin on it. I am doing self-compassion for my dissertation. I'm a clinical psychology PhD student, and I am at the Practicum placement here at Kaiser, and then also in Vallejo and also in Vacaville. So I wanted to kind of do a review really quick about what you've learned previously. So happiness for the holidays. I know that he's defined this for you previously, that happiness, according to Sonia Luber-Mirsky, I tried to memorize that. I don't think it's going to happen for me. But the experience of joy, contentment, or positive well-being combined with a sense that one's life is good, meaningful, and worthwhile. So basically, positive emotions plus meaning equals happiness. I know that you've been through a couple of these already, some of these ingredients already, and there's a lot of ways to do this. There's a lot of ways to promote positive emotion, and there's a lot of ways to find meaning in your life. But the two we're going to focus on today are first self-compassion, and then kindness towards others. So before I go into what self-compassion is and how it's going to be useful to you, I want to tell you a story. So before I tell you this story, because we're in a hospital setting, this is fictional. This is not any, just HIPAA, you know. So Carol is a woman, and she was married for 7 years. She works hard. She tries really, really hard to be a good partner, and after 7 years of marriage, her partner comes up to her and says, you know what? I'm not interested anymore. You're boring. You're unattractive. I don't love you. I'm leaving you for somebody else. I never loved you. I never enjoyed this relationship. Bye. Right? So she spends the next 2 years being really uncomfortable dating, being really uncomfortable trying to form a positive relationship with anybody, understandably, right? And she finally gets online and finds herself a date because she's ready to try again. She's feeling brave. So she goes out with a man that she's been talking to online. She's excited, she's hopeful, all of these things. And she sits down with him, and within a few minutes she notices he's checking his watch. He's kind of mopping his face a little bit and doing this wide-eyed thing at her like, oh my gosh. And finally he just goes, stop. Just stop talking. I can't take it anymore. You are so boring and so irritating, and your thighs are way larger than I expected them to be online. I have to go. And he gets up and walks away. So while Carol's sitting there, trying not to cry, waiting for the bill that she now is left with, she manages to get herself up, out into her car, and she calls her best friend on the phone. Tells her friend what happened. And her friend goes, well, duh. What did you expect to happen? Nothing ever works out for you. You know other people are smarter and prettier and more successful and more able to be precise in what they're doing. You're just all over the place. You're a mess. And she hangs up the phone.
Ouch.
Ouch, right? Does anybody think this is a helpful friend?
I don't think it's a friend.
Exactly. I don't think this is a friend. But I want you to think about what you say to yourselves when you're having a hard time, when you've met yourself with failure. Right? I see a lot of you nodding. That friend is sometimes our own voice inside of our head. And why is it so abhorrent that a friend would talk to us that way, but we talk to ourselves that way? Right? So this is self-criticism. And it is something that is rampant not only in our culture, but particularly in settings like medical settings where it requires a lot of performance, right? So what do you think the function is of self-criticism for people? Does anybody have any ideas?
Well, it sounds like it's part of the survival instinct that Dr. Paquette had introduced to us as a lot of the reason why we focus on the negative emotions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, it's a survival mechanism and why we focus on the negative emotions. I'm just repeating it for our viewers. Does anybody else? Why do you personally, if you do this, what if you don't?
Well, a lot of times it's a learned behavior from our childhood or our upbringing.
Absolutely, we internalize these voices that other people have said to us that actually were effective in a moment. A parent, a teacher saying, you know, what are you thinking? You can't do that, to alter our behavior. And in that moment it was effective, but unfortunately we also internalize those and make those voices our own. So a lot of the time, especially in high performance environments, a lot of people hold the belief that if they're not critical to themselves, they will never achieve. They will never surpass the place that they're in. But actually research says that that's not true. According to Theodore Hausner and Zuroff, obviously I picked researchers with the hardest names available, it doesn't actually help you achieve your goals. You will achieve your goals more slowly. And these are goals across the board. From professional goals, relationship goals, losing weight even, you are less likely to achieve them. I didn't write this study here, but there's also was a very large study done on management levels, and it noted that people who don't surpass middle level management are the people who are the most self-critical versus people who get to higher levels who are actually more flexible and kind to themselves. So I thought that was really interesting too. It blew my mind. So what emotion does that self-criticism evoke? How do you feel when you say something like that to yourself? Is anybody feeling brave and willing to share?
You experience the stress response, like increased heart rate and maybe sweating a little bit.
Yeah, and anxiety comes with that, right? What else comes with that?
Tendency towards self-loathing.
Yeah, self-loathing, shame. Shame is a painful emotion. It's a debilitating emotion, right? And that's really that you nailed it. It's that flight or fight, a horrible emotional response that looks like anxiety, fear, and shame. And shame debilitates us. It is physically, has a huge impact on us, right? So when we're looking at our equation for happiness, we're supposed to have positive emotion and meaning, right? So far this is not helpful. Self-criticism is not helpful in having an overall happy life and a positive experience of life. So this is a great place to intervene, to pay attention to, because this is half of our equation. If you're engaging in self-criticism consistently, you're really messing up your emotional experience, right? And it's self-created. It's your voice in your head saying these things that are creating shame, anxiety, fear, all of these things that are obviously not conducive to living a happy life. So what are we looking for? Should-haves. I should have done this. I see people smiling. I feel like most of us do this. Should have, would have, could have, right? And if you're saying those things to your head, in your head, notice that. Notice, oh, I might be engaging in self-criticism. Comparing. Are you comparing yourself to other people? Oh, she's always looks put together when she shows up at work. Or, oh, you know, they always are able to say things the right way to other people. Or, you know, oh, my brother has a bigger house than me. I mean, all the random things that you can come up with. If you're in that process of comparison, you may be engaging in self-criticism. Some other ones are if you have really high standards, if you tell people that. I just have high standards. There's a difference between standards and high standards, and paying attention to that process, if that's something that's familiar to you. And if you have a difficulty asking for help, this is one that I find really interesting, especially from when I'm talking to people in a help profession, because it means something sometimes to people if you need help, right? To some people it means that you can't. And there's a lot that comes with that I can't, I'm incapable. And as you know, in a help profession, that's not necessarily true. Sometimes it's you just need help, and that is what it is, right? So looking for all of these voices and these processes inside of your head and noting, oh, I may be engaging in self-criticism. So what do? Self-compassion is an incredibly beneficial way to interfere with the process of self-criticism. It has a lot of additional benefits. Here's just a couple that are listed. It's been used to lower rates of depression and anxiety. It helps with trauma. Eating disorders and body image is a huge one. It's helped people quit smoking, which is really incredible. It helps with chronic pain, helps you have a closer relationship. It's even helped kids be more productive in school who were previously unable to engage adequately. At the end of the presentation, there is resources. Kristen Neff is one of the foremost researchers in self-compassion. She's truly an amazing researcher and contributor to the field. These are the areas that she has on her website a research tab, and it's listed by area, and there's all the studies, and it's very easy to access if you have interest in looking in the actual studies. Here are the various areas that she's compiled studies from not just herself, but across the nation and the world of self-compassion research. It's really fascinating. I highly recommend that you look at it. Some of the ones that are probably particularly pertinent to everyone in this room is burnout and resilience and health, motivation, physiological functioning. I mean, it really slides right in line with the health profession in general, and that's not on accident. Actually, there's another researcher called Paul Gilbert, and he researches how self-compassion can help nurses recover from burnout at Stanford. So that, very interesting stuff. Okay, so what exactly is self-compassion? Self-compassion is defined by 3 components. Mindfulness, so that what we're saying, where we're noticing, oh, I'm engaging in self-criticism, right? It's just the act of noticing. I know you guys did mindfulness with Dr. Paquette last time, I believe. And that's the first part and a very essential component. To me, that is the hardest, is to notice what you're doing, what you're thinking, how that's impacting your emotional experience, right? The second is common humanity, and that's basically saying we all do this. We all engage in self-criticism. We all have moments of suffering in a variety of different ways. You're not alone, is essentially the message of this component. And thirdly is self-directed kindness, and that's where you go, you're trying your hardest. You know, it's that wishing yourself well, essentially, right? So this is the first part of our equation, our happiness equation, is generating these positive emotions. And obviously self-compassion can have a variety of influences on your life that include meaning, but for this class, we're going to talk about how it impacts positive emotions. So you can seed emotions. Emotions are not just at the will of your environment. You don't just have to respond. You can choose to nurture and foster an emotion, right? So I want all of you to do this with me. It's going to be an activity. So I want everybody to get comfortable in their chairs. And I just want you to, if you're comfortable closing your eyes, go ahead and do that. If you're not, you just find a place to rest them on the desk. I want you to take a deep breath. And I want you to think of the last time you made a mistake and were frustrated with yourself. Nothing major. And I want you to place your hand on your chest or somewhere where you can touch skin with skin. And I want you to think about the emotions that that experience brought about. And just sit with those for a second. And then I want you to say to yourself in your head, this is a moment of suffering. I'm feeling anxious, afraid, ashamed. I want you to notice any shifts you have as you say that to yourself in your emotional experience. And then I want you to remind yourself that everyone goes through these moments. Everyone around you experiences these emotions on some level. And then I want you to tell yourself you're doing the best that you can. I did the best that I could in that moment with what I had. I want you to take one more deep breath. And if you can, give yourself a brief compliment. You're strong. You're capable. You're loved. And notice how you feel in that moment. When you're ready, you can open your eyes and bring yourself back to the room. So how did that feel? Anybody notice a shift in their emotional experience?
Relaxed.
Feel more relaxed. Did anybody notice any other positive emotions? Sometimes there are those bittersweet ones, right? Where you finally get that validation that you were hoping to get. And that's a really important component of the positive emotion aspect of happiness. You have a choice. You have a choice about how you feel about the things that happen in your life. right? And if you take time to seed those positive emotions, even if they're hard at first, it's that validation that you're giving yourself that we're really looking for in the rest of the world that is so important and such a huge component of the happiness equation. So the second part of our equation is meaning. Now, I feel like in this room, kindness towards others is probably a pretty solidly meaningful thing, particularly since you're here. And you're right. And by choosing this profession, there is a lot of meaning in it, right? Being kind toward others is naturally something that human beings get pleasure out of and find meaning in. And the research supports that. It helps with depression, anxiety, helps people recover from addiction. It helps them find meaning and purpose. It actually reduced mortality by 44% relative to people who showed less kindness. It's pretty profoundly effective in terms of human relationships, right? But what happens when you are in a profession where your job is kindness, and your job is caring, and your job is holding other people's distress, right? It's not always providing you with that meaning that's necessary. So Carl Rogers said, "I have always been better at caring for and looking after others than I have in caring for myself. But in these later years, I made progress." So he's a psychologist, and he's part of the humanistic movement, which is a client-centered care movement, right, in psychology. And it's really hard because it's about the client and being there and holding that space for that client. So I feel like this is something that anybody in the health profession can relate to, right? You're so busy caring for everybody else that you forget to care for yourself, right? And what ends up happening? So burnout and compassion fatigue, I imagine these are terms everyone in this room is familiar with. But just like where we were looking for aspects of self-criticism to check ourselves and go, oh, this is a moment I need to intervene on. These are other moments. When you're noticing a pattern of cynicism, just feeling exhausted, just completely unmotivated to show up to work. When you're noticing that maybe you're feeling demoralized, irritable, just all of those experiences that you can have when are very common. I assure you that anyone who works in the profession, these professions, experiences these, and they ebb and flow. But they're also indicators, that mindfulness component, right? They're indicators that we need to intervene, that maybe we're not engaging in the care that we need, right? So of course I'm going to bring this back to self-compassion. What gets in the way as health providers who know that eating healthy, exercising, hanging out with family, setting boundaries for work environments, we know these are important things, yet somehow we are actually the people who do them least. Research indicates that we as health providers have the most difficulty engaging in self-care, which makes sense because our mentality is we're here to serve, we're here to help, and there's always somebody more important than you. That's your whole life, right? And as holidays approach, this gets worse because now the demands of your family are increasing, and many of us are obligated to cook, show up to parties, when we would typically stay home and rest. Now we have to go somewhere and buy something, and there's all these things we need to do to fulfill these obligations that are suddenly during this time of the year heightened. And our patients are struggling more. Our patients are more emotional. They're feeling the burden of the holidays, particularly if they're ill. That is not how anyone wants to spend the holidays. That expectation isn't being met, and that is hard to cope with. And who has to help them cope with it, right? Even if you're providing any kind of care, when you're dealing with someone who is suffering, you're required to be kind to them and help them. It's your job, right? So I want you to remember, some of the barriers, high workload, right, that gets in the way of self-care, time demands, paperwork, conflicting roles, all these things get in the way of us doing this. And also this mentality that I'm here for them. It's about them. I'm here to serve. This is the mentality that most of us have naturally, and that's why we found ourselves in these professions, which is when you need to implement this self-compassion. And remember that it's a pivotal part of your job. Research suggests that making sure you engage in self-care, including self-compassion, makes it more likely that you will continue being compassionate to others, which makes sense. You're constantly compassionate to others and giving and giving and giving and taking on the trauma that is associated with experiencing all of these things. You're a human being, you're going to take that on, and that's going to cause difficulties for you. And if you fail to acknowledge those difficulties and fail to provide yourself with what you need, you are going to run out of steam. That's this quote, self-care is not selfish. You cannot serve from an empty vessel. So it's your job to keep putting it back, right? So this is a very important component of your job, is to refill your vessel. And again, how you do that is one of the important ways to do that is self-compassion. Getting in a regular practice of engaging in self-compassion is important for a lot of reasons.
We are scheduled in this room here at 1
So
o'clock.
that's,
I can take the back half if you guys can scoot up.
so I'll work with you to find a different place, because I have this reserved. There must have been a problem.
Here.
So, we've talked about how most of us have this self-criticism thought process. And our brain loves patterns. We like to do things over and over and over again, and we have a way of engaging with ourselves and the world that is patternistic. So part of this, of making sure you take care of yourself and buffer against burnout, is shifting away from the self-criticism into self-compassion. By developing that pattern, you're more likely to engage in self-care, right? Because now it's in your head that, oh, I'm important, I matter. My self-care is an important part of my job because of course I need self-care. Everyone in this profession needs self-care, right? And so that's part of the way, I understand I'm going back to self-compassion a lot for obvious reasons, but it's a way to protect your meaning. Where did it go? Preserving meaning, like I said before. It's a way to preserve meaning. Because a lot of us came into this profession because it's meaningful to us. But if we continue to engage in this way, it's inevitable that we will reach a point where it's not meaningful anymore. And a way to preserve that meaning, to make sure your happiness equation is lining up, is to engage in self-compassion regularly. And with self-compassion comes all these other positive behaviors that will keep you bolstered for what you need to do and what you love doing, what really is meaningful to you, right? So this is my challenge to you today. Don't worry, I'm not going to make you do another mindfulness activity. I know those can be taxing. I want you to do something that you do every day. I imagine every day, each one of you does something that is kind for another human being. Even if you're getting paid to do it, even if it's your job, it is still a kindness, right? What you do is a kindness. And do that activity when you're busy and have a million others to do and have paperwork and you're thinking about what you're going to serve for dinner or who you're meeting this weekend, right? Do that. And notice how you feel after. And then I want you to do it again later, but first I want you to take another 30-second to a minute self-compassion break, just like I showed you here. You can find them on YouTube, anywhere you want. They're all over. Just type in self-compassion break. And then I want you to do the thing that is kind. Whether that is walking up to someone's bedside and informing them about options, or giving a vaccination, or whatever it is, providing someone with a bill. It's all part of this process of caring for someone. And then I want you to pay attention to how you feel, and if it changes your experience of it. And even just the slightest shift, you're looking for those tiny shifts. That's how psychological well-being and behavioral change works. It's not big, it's small, and it's in inches, right? So that is my challenge to you, that you notice the difference. When you're compassionate to yourself, how meaningful is your work versus when you're not? Another great and a very important thing that I harp on all the time and really truly believe in is creating an environment where self-compassion is an important facet of the culture, right? And so part of that is a lot of us really need permission from peers that we deserve to take a break now, that we deserve to be kind to ourselves, that we've earned it. It's a high-achieving field, right? And that's obviously not the ideal. Preferably, we would be able to do that for ourselves, but helping the people around you do that not only serves your meaning, it also serves your environment so that it's easier to engage in those things. I think a really wonderful thing to do is write just a note on a Post-it. This does not have to be like a huge letter or something like that. Just a note on a Post-it note. I really appreciated when you delivered those for me the other day. It really, in that moment, I really needed help, and you were really helpful to me. and reminding them, you know, you really deserve to take a break. I hope you really enjoy your weekend. Something like that. So you kind of start to contribute to this culture of being compassionate to yourself and helping one another notice opportunities to be compassionate to themselves, right? So some of the helpful resources, obviously Dr. Paquette's Real Happiness. I have to mention that one. It's a great book, everyone should buy it. Also, The Power of Vulnerability by Brenda Brown is an absolutely phenomenal resource. She does her audiobook, she's the one who reads it, and it is a life-altering book. I really deeply give it to your family for Christmas. It's amazing, and I really highly recommend that book. And there's a couple of others on here as well. And then some helpful resources. So Kristen Neff's self-compassion website, that's the website I was telling you about that has the research on it. She very intelligently categorized it by area. So researchers can go and find the area. So I work with resilience, self-compassion, and resilience. It's all right there. Very, very smart and really easily accessible. She even has the PDFs on all of those right there, so you can access them. And then the loving kindness meditation. I mentioned that self-criticism can be like this habit that we have, and we want to break that habit. And how do we get good at something and form habits? We practice, right? So on there's the loving kindness meditation. There's more information about it on contemplativemind.org. It's also on YouTube. If you just type in loving kindness meditation, it's about 13 minutes. There's a couple different versions. If you listen to that once, twice, 3 times a week before you go to sleep, that's the process where you're practicing shifting your mentality away from self-criticism and towards self-compassion. And that is a really fantastic way to make a big shift in your life. There's additional helpful resources. There's apps that you can look at. Calm is a good one for meditation and mindfulness. And then, yeah. So does anybody have any questions or comments?
Thank you very much.
And you can email me or Dr. Paquette if you have anything you want to know, or if there's resources that aren't available, etc.